Michael Makley, who was William Sharon?
Well, William Sharon, we're sitting here in the railroad yard in front of the steam engines, one of the steam engines that they use to run stuff up to the Comstock and run the ore back out of the Comstock. And William Sharon created that. But his story starts way before he did the train. He's a little bit older than the people that usually came to the Comstock. Usually that's for young people coming up here. He was in his 40s when he came to the Comstock, and he becomes the wealthiest of the mine owners for a time anyway.
Where did he come from?
He comes up from San Francisco. So he had he was in real estate in San Francisco. He's a really bright man. And we'll see a really ruthless man when he's dealing with business. But he had a small fortune, $150,000, that he loses to a stock sharp. The mining stock market is just starting in San Francisco. He loses his fortune and has to start over. And there's a man that becomes his partner, takes him in as a partner, a man named William Ralston. And Ralston started the Bank of California, which was the largest institution in the West. When it started, they said people treated it as if it was the United States Treasury. So he takes in Sharon, has Sharon come up to the Comstock. Sharon looks around and sees how disorganized the mining is up here, and tells Ralston, hey, we could start a branch of the bank up there and make some money. And Ralston goes along with them, signs him up as a partner, and they're going to make huge fortunes.
How was the Comstock disorganized when he came here?
For one thing, they saw these huge riches up here, and one of the things that they thought would really make money would be mills to process the ore, and so everybody started building mills. Well, they overbuilt the mills. That's one of the first things that Sharon saw. So Sharon started loaning money to these guys building the mills at 2% a month. Now, that's 24% a year. But the guys who had been loaning money earlier up here, they were charging 5% a month interest. So everybody switched over to the Bank of California and to Sharon, and then as soon as they couldn't make their payments, there were too many mills, as soon as they're not working in good ore and they can't make their payments, then Sharon foreclosed on them, so that the bank ended up owning 7 mills. Sharon, Ralston, another partner named D.O. Mills, a banker from Sacramento, and a few other investors from San Francisco, they end up creating what was known as the bank crowd or the bank ring, and they buy those mills from the bank at a cut rate. Sharon continues foreclosing on other mills. Eventually they own 17 mills up here at the bank ring. So,
if we could go back a little bit, what year are we talking about, and what's going on in the U.S. and Nevada at this time?
Yeah, this is the 1860s, and the miners out here, the Civil War is going on, but the folks out here are really adventurous young people that are disassociated from that in large part. They saw themselves as part of the Union, but in large part they took no part in that. When he comes up here and starts up the branch of Bank of California, one of Ralston's friends comes down. Ralston's in San Francisco, and one of his friends comes down and says, hey, you've got to get Sharon out of there. He's a gambler. He's playing high stakes poker most every night. Ralston says, well, does he win or lose? The guy said, well, he almost always wins. Ralston said, that's the very guy I want up there. But now what Ralston wasn't considering, poker's a zero-sum game. One person wins, everybody else loses, and that's a dangerous quality to have in a partner.
What was he like as a person?
Sharon was, he was small in stature, weighed maybe 135 pounds. He was 5 foot something, but not very much. But he had a dominant personality. People described his eyes, his enemies would say, yeah, he had evil in his eyes, but his buddies would say, nah, he's determined, and no bluff is gonna be put over on him. So they would say that's why he was such a good poker player as well.
So he's now acquired these 17 mills. What does he do with them?
So this is the bank crowd. They're either members of the wealthiest people in San Francisco are either members of that or friends of members of that ring, and so they control most of the big mines up here on the Comstock. Sharon has them send all their ore to the bank ring mills, so that's how they get the 17 from 7. Guys are going bankrupt with their mills because they're all going to the bank ring mills. So they're making tremendous amounts of money, Sharon and his partners. Now, Sharon was disliked in a lot of quarters. His machinations, his ruthlessness as a businessman were fable. One point, the Yellow Jacket mine, which is just over the hill from here, it's in Gold Hill, but the Yellow Jacket mine strikes a fantastic vein of gold and silver, and everybody knows about it. So everybody buys shares of stock in the Yellow Jacket. The price goes up, people continue to buy. Sharon realized that it was better for just his partners to share in the profits rather than all these mine owners. So he has the superintendent of the Yellow Jacket mix waste rock in with the good ore. And what that does, it causes their mills to run 24 hours a day. The mine, what should have been profits going to the owners, the shareholders, instead all that money is going to William Sharon and his partners, and those owners are being assessed more even though they're working in this great ore. There's a man named Adolph Sutro, and Sutro was another brilliant guy. He that was up here on the Comstock. One of the problems for the mines was that as they got deep underground, they hit pockets of steaming hot water. It would flood out their mines. They had pumps, but they were small and not very effective, so mines might be flooded out for weeks or months at a time. Sutro's plan was to build a tunnel and come in underneath the mines and then dig up to the mines themselves, drain all that water out as they were going, and then they would be able to, he ran railroad tracks in and out, and they could bring in men and equipment and bring out the ore. The mines thought that, the miners, the people that controlled the mines thought that was a really good plan. They wanted that, and they pledged $600,000 to help Sutro get that tunnel going. Well, Sharon pointed out that then, if that happened, because Sutro was coming in from miles away over in this little town called Dayton, it's over behind us here, all the profits, all the mills and that would all have to be down there, or those would be the profitable ones. Well, it was already developed up here in Virginia City, and so Sharon talked the mine owners into take that money back, those pledges back, give them to him to build the V&T Railroad, and that's exactly what happened. Now, at the same time, he got the counties that were involved, Washoe and Ormsby County, he gets them to pledge $500,000 each by his own bluff, his own poker playing prowess. He tells them he's going to build that railroad out over Geiger Grade, which goes away from their counties, and they would lose all this money. So he had no intention of doing that because all his mills were back here in these counties. But nobody called his bluff. Instead, they come up with this money. So he builds the V&T Railroad with over $1.5 million. He and his partners, primarily Ralston and D.O. Mills, they ended up spending $45,000 to build this. In its heyday, the San Francisco Chronicle said that Sharon was making no less than $2,000 a day.
And what was the exact purpose of the V&T Railroad?
Well, all the above. It was bringing people and supplies up to the Comstock, taking the ore to the mills, and then taking the ore and whatever else back out. So,
what about the relationship with his business partners? Did that stay positive?
That's an interesting question. It does, except that his friend Ralston, who took him in as a partner when he was broke, Ralston is known as the man who built California. Ralston controlled all this money with the Bank of California, and he invested in everything in California, starting with the wool industry and the California wineries. He's the first to invest in that. He built the Palace Hotel, which took up a whole city block. He built the Grand Hotel, the California Theater he built, New Montgomery Street he built. This is Ralston, did all this. But at the same time, he was using bank money and his own money. Nobody knew, except for Ralston, where one started and the other and stopped, and then the other started. So in 1875, there's a depression across America. Well, actually, it had started a couple years earlier in the East. It comes to Virginia City in 1875, and it comes to California in 1875. The Bank of California, Ralston has been spending money that really they didn't have. They're supposed to have $2 million in their vaults. And in August of 1875, when someone inspects, there's $500,000 and then a bunch of tags, a bunch of IOUs from Ralston. When that happened, Sharon, this is where his poker playing comes in. A morning in late August, Sharon goes into the mining stock market and throws all his stocks for sale, throws them all out there, and it was said that it was the largest sale in the history of the stock market. When people start, there had been rumors about what was going on at the bank and about Ralston overplaying his hand. So when this happens, then the rumors start up. Sharon is trying to get money to save the Bank of California. Well, he wasn't. Sharon was getting that money out while the getting was good. He ends up putting that money in Wells Fargo Bank, his own money. But the rumor spread, and by 2:30 in the afternoon, the bank is crowded, and the street outside the bank is crowded with people trying to withdraw their money. They think the bank is going to collapse. If Ralston could make it to 3 o'clock, then he could get the wealthiest people in San Francisco behind him, and he might be able to save the bank. He can't do it. By 2:45, the big iron doors, he orders them to be swung shut, and the Bank of California suspends, and everyone's in shock. This is, you can imagine, the U.S. Treasury. It's like they had to suspend. So now everyone's worried about a depression. Ralston will end up signing his properties and signing everything over to his partner, William Sharon, and then the next day he swims out into San Francisco Bay and drowns. It's a huge loss for the city. The procession behind, in his funeral, the procession is 1.5 miles long. The people, the common people loved him. Looks like the coast is really headed for a depression if this bank can't get back on its feet. It was just going to happen until William Sharon finds out he's liable. He's a partner of Ralston. He's liable for this stuff. So he goes to the wealthiest San Franciscos and cajoles them and tells them, we got to get this started. He plays on their civic duty. Some of them he plays on their friendships with Ralston. We can't let his reputation be ruined. Others he guarantees if they'll give money to the bank. He'll guarantee their investment. Others, if he has something on him, he threatens them. And in the end, he raises $7.5 million. The bank can reopen. It's one of the great banking feats in the American West, and it's all because William Sharon.
How powerful does William Sharon get?
He's the most powerful man on the Comstock. He becomes a senator from Nevada. This is even though he does that after he's already moved to San Francisco. So he's living in San Francisco, supposed to be representing Nevada in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate. But at that time, that's when the bank collapse occurred, and he spends the 6 years that he's a senator really unraveling all that Ralston has, putting it together with his own fortune. He'll end up, number one, with one of the worst records of any U.S. senator as far as attendance. But also he ends up being the wealthiest man in California for that time. He was paying, for several years, he paid 1/50th of all the taxes in California. William Sharon was paying them.
So we've talked a lot about, I guess, him as a businessman. What about his personal life? What was going on there?
Well, for one, William Sharon was married and had 3 children. Even before his wife's death, he was known as a womanizer. At one point, he signs a book up at Glenbrook, up at Lake Tahoe. He's up there at the hotel and signs in William Sharon and Lady. And so it was pretty well known that was going on. A real interesting episode. It takes up probably the last third of the book that I wrote about him. His wife dies. He's getting on a train to go back east. He's no longer a senator, and they arrest him. He's charged with adultery. Well, no one knows anything about him being remarried, and so it's a scandal, and it's a huge surprise to everyone. It turns out a woman named Sarah Althea Hill, who also came from money. She comes from Missouri. Her parents had money, but they're both deceased now. She now is claiming that she and Sharon were married, and she has a contract, handwritten contract with both their signatures on it. She also has some letters and notes that are addressed to dear wife, and in his handwriting. And so she claims, hey, he's committed adultery with these other women. He had run for the Senate again after he served his 6 years. They couldn't let the marriage be known, she says, because there's another woman who's having his baby who would bring that to light, and his chances to be reelected to the Senate would he wouldn't have had a chance. So she sues him and divorce is a state issue, and so she takes it to state court. Well, he has powerful friends, Sharon, one of whom is Stephen Field. Stephen Field is going to be the longest serving Supreme Court justice at his own death, the U.S. Supreme Court. And Stephen Field stays at Sharon's, the Palace Hotel he and Ralston had built. Whenever he's in San Francisco, he stays there, and he and Sharon are friends, and he advises Sharon to sue in federal court. Well, Sharon can do that because he claims that he's a citizen of Nevada. So now it's Nevada versus California, so it could be a federal issue in that era. And so he does. He countersues against Sarah Althea Hill. It's the scandal of the century. You can imagine an ex-senator. He's an older gentleman. She is young and beautiful, and it's going to go to trial, and it does. And it's a scandalous trial. There are voodooists who testify that they had helped Sarah Althea Hill. The ones that are testifying for Sharon are saying, yeah, she was trying to gain his heart, so I gave her these potions or had her do whatever. In her defense, though, they would say, yeah, she did that stuff, but she was doing it to hang on to her husband. So the trial was really a crazy circus of an affair. In the end, she is going to win at the state level. Sarah Althea Hill is going to be granted divorce. Well, at that point, she marries David Terry, her attorney. But now it goes to the federal court, and Stephen Field, the Supreme Court Justice, is the circuit judge out here. He comes out, and it goes all the way to him. Well, now he wants that contract and those letters. He says they're forgeries. There had been testimony during the state trial. Some experts had said, oh, they're forgeries. Others had said, no, they're authentic. It just depended on who they were testifying for. So now Field is saying, no, they are forgeries, and I want them. When he says that in court, Sarah Althea Hill, who is a feisty woman, she stands up and says, how much are they paying you? How much are the Sharon people paying you to make this decision? Field is going to find for the Sharon family, but none of this matters to Sharon because he has died a couple years earlier. He died after the state court decision, and he will say on his deathbed that court case was a dagger in his heart.
What is William Sharon's legacy here in the Comstock and in the state of Nevada?
You know, it's just not as great as you would imagine for all that he did. Now, the V&T Railroad probably is his most outstanding legacy. They're running it again from Carson City up here, and so they'll talk about William Sharon some. There's a building in town called the Sharon House, but there's way more stuff named for William Ralston, for example. He is not as renowned as you would have thought.
When did you first hear about William Sharon?
Well, you know, I have read a lot of Western history, and always when you read histories about the Comstock, there's something about William Sharon, but it would only be a few lines or a paragraph. So I was intrigued to find out why. And I believe the reason, the book that I write is the first one about William Sharon, and he did all these great things, but he really was a villain to an awful lot of people, and I think that's why no one picked up his story before this.